Hi, it's Rob from the Brush and Boltgun. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to paint a Primaris Lieutenant Helmet. If you like the channel and would like to support us, our Ko-fi and Patreon page are linked below. Now on to the video. So the first colour we're going to use is Citadel Mephiston Red. This is going to be to do the initial stripe down the centre of the helm and to do the lenses on the helm too. So the red stripe only starts just above the eye lenses, runs all the way across the top of the helm, down the back to above those two spots, those two little metal sockets on the back of the helm. So you want to give yourself a nice smooth red stripe down there. Now if you're looking at the width of it, it's just shy of the width of the ridge, like what looks like the air intake on the top of the helm, and it's just narrower than that. You've got a little bit of that ridge on either side, so it's a good way to measure how wide you're doing the stripe. Doesn't matter too much if you go too wide with it, because when you come to do the white stripes on either side, which we'll be doing in a moment, you can narrow that down again. So we're just going to use some Leadbelcher. This is to do the two little tubes on the side of the helm and also the two sockets at the back of the helm too. Like so. I'm going to use a little bit of Vallejo Black, but whichever black you normally use is fine. This is just going to be to do the little bits of neck kind of seal, those what looks like rubber seals between the armour plates. I'm just doing this on this model, not highlighting it, it's just so that you can see the bottom of the helm a bit clearer. So now I'm going to use some Citadel Retributor armour, and that is just to do the little skull in the centre of the helm. We are then using Vallejo White, but as always, whichever white you tend to use, you can use that. All we're going to do is do a little stripe down either side of the red stripe. Now this stripe is probably about as a quarter to half of the width of the red stripe on either side. Say maybe a quarter to a third of that width maybe. You just want to paint this running alongside the red stripe on either side. If you do these too wide, don't worry about it, because you will be coming back over them with some Macragge blue to get that blue back of the helm. If you get that base white layer down, that should be fine. Now I'm going to start shading. We're going to use Citadel Druchii Violet to do the eye lenses and the red stripe down the centre of the helm. Now there's not too much area to do with the Druchii Violet, to be honest. I just tend to do around the skull on the front of the helm, a little bit down the back, and then that little kind of air intake on the front too. Now I'm going to use a little bit of Citadel Drakenhof Nightshade. I'm going to paint this all over the blue on the helm. Now for the rest of the video, until we start colouring that back in again, it is quite dark on that blue. And that's just because the Druchii Violet does darken it down quite a lot. But it means that when you start reapplying the Macragge blue, that will pick out the details quite nicely. I'm going to use a tiny spot of Agrax Earthshade from Citadel, and that is to do the skull, the little golden skull on the front of the helm. So another swift layer there. Next up, Citadel Nuln Oil. This is to do the two little tubes, one on each side of the helm, and then the two sockets on the back as well, just to dull those down, get a little bit of shade at either side of the tubes and inside both of the sockets. Now I'm going to use some Citadel Contrast Apothecary White, and this is going to be to shade the white on the helm. I like this to use as shade because it's that kind of pale grey colour, which gives you the details on the miniature without being too dark and making it horrific to paint over with the white. So now I'm going to reapply the white. You're going to leave the Apothecary White in the recesses and then just reapply the white over the areas that you painted previously. Now you'll want to do a little bit of the white down the side of that ridge on the back of the helm, and also on that ridge as it runs down from the top of the helm So you can do the sides on those a little bit, and you can do the stripe on the helmet on either side of that, and leave the contrast with the grey shading in between those two sections. Again, it doesn't matter if you go onto the blue, because we will be doing the blue shortly, and that will cover any little over paints or wonky lines or anything like that. Now I'm going to use Citadel Mephiston Red. We're just going to paint that stripe. So as I said earlier, you can use this to even out the edge of the stripe against the white stripe that's going on there. So as you're painting this on, I always leave a little bit of the shade at the very, very back of the helmet, because that would be slightly darker because you'd have the power pack there, and also because if the light's coming down from above, that section of the helmet is pretty much vertical, so you wouldn't catch that much light all the way down to the bottom of it. So you leave a little bit of the shade at the bottom there, and then you're just going to smooth out that red, leaving shade in the recesses where you've got that gap at the front like the air intake, and also around where the skull is as well, because you'll have a little bit of that Druchii violet shade there, as well as the Agrax Earthshade. Now some Evil Sun Scarlet from Citadel. This is a nice orangey highlight for the Mephiston Red. So you're going to cover about 50% of the area that you've just covered with the Mephiston Red with this. So you obviously don't go down as far at the back or the front. Like so. Now I'm going to use a little bit of Citadel Wild Rider Red, which is the final highlight for the red. We're just going to do a tiny little bit of this on the front of that ridge. There's not really too much to do with this because there's only that one particular ridge and detail that you want to pick out, so do a little bit at the front of that ridge, and then maybe a little bit down the edges of the red on either side, but not too far, only a little tiny bit. Now we're going to reapply the blue to the helm. This is where the helm will start showing up its colour once more. It won't be quite so dark. So you want to be thinking about where the light is coming from, and reapplying the blue to those areas. So these little side bits at the back, you can leave a little bit of shade at the bottom of those because they're going to have the shade of the backpack, and the kind of light coming from above isn't going to catch those areas too much. But you want to try and leave the Drakenhof Nightshade in the recesses, and also get that Macragge blue back onto all the surfaces that will be catching the light. Like so. Next up, we're going to add a little bit of Vallejo White to the Macragge blue. I'm going to start to highlight this blue. So you want to be covering about 50% of the area that you covered with the Macragge blue. Now when I put that on, that was slightly too light. So I've just darkened that down a little bit with a little bit more Macragge blue. We are just adding the highlighted colour to about 50% of the area that we put the original Macragge blue layer down. Even the shade in the recesses. So you end up with the Macragge blue, then the shade, and also the highlight. Slightly off screen there, sorry. Like so. I'm going to add a little bit more white to the previous mix. I'm going to start doing the final highlights. This one's mainly to catch edges, so you want to be doing like the edges of these vents on the front here. You want to do the edge underneath each eye lens. And just pick out some of the details and go around the edges of those, just to make those really stand out. It means that even if you're looking at the figure from far away, you'll be able to see those details clearly. It makes the miniature look that little bit better, I think. So I'll just finishing off the highlights here. I'll just let you know the next part is going to skip forward one. For some reason the footage for the initial recolouring of the eye lens is gone. So all you need to do is add a little bit of Mephiston Red to sort of the back 2/3 of the eye lens, leaving a shaded area at the front and the top of the eye lens. I'll link up the eye lens video here, but once you've done that, we're now going to add a little bit of white to the Mephiston Red. I'm going to do the first highlight. And what you want to be doing is using this to highlight the back end here. You can see where that layer already is on one side. I'm just going to add it to the other side there. And then we're going to add a little bit more white to the previous mix just to lighten that up one more time. It's a very light pink, that one. Like so. And the final highlight on the lenses is going to be just plain white. We're going to do a spot at the front of each lens in that dark area, like so. And then do a really small, thin line at the rear side, bottom of each lens, like so. And this is the finished helm. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Also, think about subscribing to some of our other social media, linked below. Thanks very much. If you like the channel, you enjoy the content, and you'd like to support us, our Ko-fi and Patreon pages are linked below. Thanks very much.